Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, or if you are new here then please do me a favour and hit that subscribe button. So it is 4:30 in the morning here in the UK. I am going to the airport in about an hour and a half. I will be leaving to go to the airport to go on holiday. First round of the draft has just finished. Want to give my quick thoughts on the Browns, as you might notice in a slightly different background, because my friend is asleep in the main room that I usually record in. So I thought I'd do him the kindness of coming over into this room and recording this video here. But as I said, very tired, quite late, but good overall first round for the Browns. I'm pretty pleased with how this first round went overall. Started pretty well, get a trade back that I think everyone pretty much wanted in the first place. 12 and 20 off Dallas was the dream, but that was looking more and more unlikely as we got closer to the draft. So to be able to just drop back 3 spots, get the guy that I think they would have took at 6 anyway. For once I think the mock drafts were actually right with Spencer Fano. 2 days ago we had pretty much I think 6 for 6 of all the mock drafts, all the 4.0s, the last mock drafts before the draft. Pretty much all had is it Fano or Fano? I'm going to go with Fano, going to the Browns at 6. They end up dropping back 3 spots, pick up a 3rd round pick and a 5th round pick from the Chiefs, who surprisingly came up for Delane, which was quite a surprise when that pick came through. And obviously, still get the guy that, as I said, you were probably going to take at 6 anyway. Personally, I would have took Monroe Freeling ahead of Fanu. I made that pretty clear. I said he was my favourite prospect, but I also said that Mawanoa and Fanu were my the 2 guys that I would also draft. Monroe Freeling might have been my personal preference, but those 2 guys are in the same tier in terms of I think you should look to target one of those 3 guys in the first pick of this draft, and hopefully do that with a trade back, because that would have obviously been bit better value for one of those guys. I think most people would agree for at that spot. Go back to between 9 to 12, grab them there, pick up a couple of extra picks. That's what they ended up doing. So as I said, really like that pick. I think that Fano's a really good football player. I think he's the 2nd best football offensive lineman in the draft today. The reason why Freeling has been like my favourite kind of guy is just because of the upside stuff. I've made it clear plenty of times how I can get a little bit tied into the upside stuff, and I just Freeling left tackle I just felt like has the best chance to become a franchise left tackle. But Fano is in my opinion, the 2nd best offensive lineman in the draft right now today. Whether he ends up playing tackle, which Todd Monken has already said he will play them at left tackle, that's the plan for him to play left tackle. So if that works out, great. If it doesn't work out, I'm pretty sure he's going to be a very good guard. If all things fail, and at 9, yes, maybe the value's not amazing for a guard, but as I said, I think worst case scenario is that he's a pretty good guard. So best case scenario, you've got a franchise left tackle, and it's one of them where he's not. It's purely the length stuff, and it's the arm length, etc. Like he has the athleticism to play tackle. He has the athleticism to play left tackle. I mean, he's arguably one of the most athletic offensive linemen in the class. Tested 2nd in the 40, 1st in a couple of the other agility drills. So a really athletic offensive lineman. He moves really well. So he has the athleticism to play tackle. It's just it's the length that is the one concern, and obviously another reason why Monroe Freeling was slightly above him and Mawanoa for me. But as I said, really happy with this pick, and especially when you factor in the trade back. If they had took Fano at 6, which is what I've obviously when those mock drafts came out, I said then like I wouldn't hate it, but I do think 6 is a little bit rich, just because the chances of him maybe not transitioning to be a tackle ended up being a guard. And so to be able to yes, only trade back 3 spots, get a 3rd round pick and a 5th round pick, I still think that's a great outcome when you factor that in with if you were going to take Fano at 6 anyway. So I think that was a great first pick. And then a lot of us sat there, I think, as the next picks came through, thinking, right, let's see what wide receiver falls to 24. And obviously we had the whole wide receiver offensive tackle battle, shall we say, throughout this off season, all the fans on social media, I was obviously in the team offensive tackle side of things, having fun with it, and for the Browns to take the tackle first, obviously something that I myself have been advocating for. I'm now sat there going, right, let's hope one of the wide receivers that I like is there at 24. Otherwise, I might look a little bit silly saying you should grab the tackle first. And I think one of the wide receivers I like will be there at 24. And if they're not, then obviously, as I said, I might look a little bit silly if that was the outcome. And then what ended up happening, we got the run on tackles that I thought we were going to get. I think up to 6, 7. I keep saying six, sorry, but up to 6 or 7 offensive linemen ended up getting drafted before pick 24. Caleb Loma was the only guy left on the board at 24 at that tackle spot, which might have been fine for some people if they were to go with Tyson, let's say at 6 or at not 9, because obviously he went to 8 at the Saints, but some people might have been fine with that. But it was it just goes to show that people that said all the tackles, there'd be plenty of options at 24. That didn't end up being the case, and 6, 7 offensive linemen ended up going before 24, whereas only 3 wide receivers did. So that's what I thought was going to happen, and that is what ended up happening. But don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that to take credit. I think that's what most people thought was going to happen, and that is what ended up happening. So as I was saying, I'm sat there going, right, well, one of these wide receivers get to 24. I was, at first I thought let's just be Casey Concepcion, because I thought Lemon's going to go in the next kind of 4 picks when we got down to like 11 range, and then Lemon started to fall, and I thought, oh okay, maybe Lemon falls enough for you to get into striking distance for you to trade up for him. The Eagles end up beating you to it. They trade up for him, and then best case scenario for me is that Casey's Concepcion was then on the board at 24, and the Browns made that pick. There was him, Omar Cooper, and Denzel Boston, probably the 3 top guys in that second tier of wide receivers that were on the board when the Browns got to 24. Part of the reason why I wanted to go tackle first is I thought that would be the case. I thought most of those second tier guys would be there. Didn't end up just being most, it was all of them, as obviously only Lemon, Tyson and Tate obviously viewed as the top 3 guys that went before the Browns took Casey Concepcion. So their wide receiver 4. He was my wide receiver 4 in this draft. They ended up taking him as the wide receiver 4. So value matches up there. Get him at 24, and this is a pick that I'm really excited about. I don't know if if anyone saw my conversation with Jack Brentnell a few days ago talking about the wide receivers. Me and him both spoke pretty highly of Casey Concepcion, someone that I would be really excited to see in a Todd Monken offense, and my wish is granted. Casey Concepcion is a Cleveland Brown. Factor that in with the Fano pick. I'm going to keep messing it up and saying Fano or Fano, but either way, I'll get it right eventually. And I am also tired, as I've been up for about 26 hours, but still, I will try and do better. But to get both of them as a combination, we did all of these different combinations that the Browns could possibly do in this draft, whether it was offensive tackle and wide receiver then offensive tackle, BPA then offensive tackle or wide receiver, whatever it was. And this was arguably one of the top. This would have been one of the top combinations for me for the Browns to do. Like my best combination would have been a Monroe Freeling and a Jordan Tyson, but then as we second, third, fourth best combinations, this would definitely be one of those. And so to get Casey Concepcion, who's someone that I just think is a really exciting player, does he end up being a dominant wide receiver 1 in the NFL? That's obviously another question. I'm not sure that I wouldn't confidently sit here and say that, but I think he's a player that can be very, very, very effective and productive for an NFL team. He has traits that just transition well to the NFL. Arguably not the best stop-start speed in this draft class. He is one of the more athletic, one of the more just fast, shall we say. And it's not fast in terms of just straight line speed, but in terms of agility, etc., etc. One of the best yak threats overall in this draft class, not just at wide receiver, tight end as well, even including Sadiq, etc. So just a really, really fun player as well. Someone that his first year at NC State, I think he had like 40 carries and averaged like 7 carries 7 yards per carry. So someone that is being used all over the field. Just get him the ball in his hands, and he can create plays, and he's an exciting player. And as I said, is he going to be a consistent, dominant wide receiver? What he's not, he's not an X receiver that a lot of Browns, I think, quite a lot of Browns wanted, with obviously like a Carnell Tate, with maybe a Denzel Boston here at this spot at 24. But Casey Concepcion, as I said, was my favourite of the second tier wide receivers. Someone that I just think is a really fun player and could be a really productive NFL player. And the Browns are able to get him here at 24. So overall, I think this is a really, really solid draft, first round for the Browns. It's not amazing. Oh my God, we're winning the Super Bowl, but I think this is, in terms of where they were at, all the talk going into this draft, we're in this kind of spot at 6 where the value doesn't really match up for what we need and the best players at that position, etc., etc. The first few picks went amazingly, don't get me wrong. We're getting to a point where it's like, wow, Arvell Reese might be here at 6, so someone might come up for a bit more, but obviously he ended up going at 5. So I just think, for how it all fell, how the value worked out, I think this was one of the better case scenarios for the Browns and one of the better outcomes that the Browns could have had. And I think this is really good work from the Browns, from the front office, from Andrew Berry, from everyone involved in this draft in the first round. Dee Podesta left two years ago, year and a half ago, whatever it was. Last year was the first draft without him. Had a really good draft class, arguably one of the best draft class in Cleveland Browns history. And then, I'm not saying this is going to be as good as or better, but I think that we're off to a really good start, and I think this is a really solid start. As I said, Fano bringing him in, that yes, you're going to try to play him at left tackle. Hopefully that works out, and if it does work out, great. We've got a really athletic left tackle, franchise left tackle, someone that has been very productive at college. He has played left tackle his first year at Utah. It's not like a Blake Miller situation where it's strictly a right tackle, only played right tackle. So it's not like he's not used to it. But obviously, and then, as I said, if that doesn't work out, I think worst case scenario with someone like a Spencer Fano is that he's a really good guard. And yes, 9 might be a little bit rich for that, but I think that's a pretty safe bet to make. And then Casey Concepcion at 24, as I said, my favourite of the second tier wide receivers. Great value there for me. My wide receiver 4, Browns get him as the wide receiver 4 in this draft. So overall, good work from the Browns, good work from Andrew Berry. Get the trade back that we wanted, get 2 players that were high on my list for both of those spots. So I'm happy about that. I'll wrap this one up. As I said, I'll give my more detailed thoughts and analysis, shall I say? I say analysis like I'm a professional at this, but you know what I mean. And obviously, break this down a bit more as we go through the weekend, and obviously as we get day 2 tomorrow, that the Browns now have an extra pick for 74, so that will obviously exciting, get an extra dart to throw at some of these players, and whether that's a centre, DB, who knows, EMW, we'll wait and see obviously for tomorrow. But as I said, I'll give a more detailed thoughts on this throughout the week, as I'm on holiday. But as I said, now at nearly 5 a.m. and me having to leave for the airport in just over an hour, I'll wrap this one up. But let me know your thoughts. What do you guys think for this first round for the Browns? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Let me know what you think in the comments, as I said. But as always, thank you so much for watching. If you do enjoy my content, please drop this video a like, hit the subscribe button. It's free, but it really, really helps out my channel. You can also check the links in the description to see where you can follow and interact with me on social media. As I always say, I'm trying to build a community of Cleveland Browns fans, and even if that means only get to talk to one fan a day while I'm in my bedroom recording this at 5 a.m, just about to go to the airport, then I'm happy. Thanks again for watching, guys. Have a great rest of the weekend, great draft weekend. I'll see you obviously very soon. It'll be a different background there. Hopefully a sunnier background. By the weather, looks like it'll be a sunnier background over there in Spain. So have a great weekend, guys. But most importantly, go Browns.